everyone and welcome back. In today's video, James and I are excited to share part 1 of our latest project, finishing the loft space in our cottage. There's been plenty of hard work, a few laughs and a lot of dust, and we can't wait to show you the progress so far. Stay tuned for the finished reveal in an upcoming video and enjoy coming along with us. So, because we're screwing these at the bottom, on the side that's not so pretty, we'd simply flip it around those pieces and then screw them back on. And these are basically some walk-on platforms for the little room upstairs on either side of the wall. So when you need to go into the roof space, you have something to step onto. So here I am thinking I'm working ahead, but I did the wrong thing. Apparently what you do not do is screwing from a thick size into a thinner size. Well, that doesn't work.
Alright, I'm flying solo this morning. What we need to do is put in a vertical section of wall here. So supports for it need to go in. Firstly, we need to mark it. I'm standing on my square. So, as my good builder friend says, it's all easy if everything is straight, plumb and square. So I'm not going to trust that alone because nothing's ever straight, plumb and square. So what I'm going to do is run a string line across the top to get them all in line, which will mean that all of these marks I just put in probably aren't in line, but we'll work on an average between the two. And then hopefully no one will notice if anything's not quite straight. Pretty good. This building's been here for about 6 years now, so you'd expect these to have deformed in some way. I did spend a bit of time just planing them down because some of them weren't quite flat, so it's obviously paying off now. Just mark where these go vertically in this direction now. This isn't so critical, but I can't help myself. Right, so normally now you would skew nail these down like that and like that with a nail gun. I don't have a nail gun and I'm very reluctant to hammer in 65mm nails right on top of a very well plastered ceiling. So that's right just below us. So I don't want to crack the plaster joints or risk it. So I found some 65mm, the Climber Coat decking screws that are left over from the deck that's done on the barn. So I'm going to use them because screwing them in won't put vibrations down through the ceiling and crack the plaster. Again, probably going a bit over the top. But to make sure that these don't move, because when you're skew nailing or skew screwing, I guess what we're doing, it's very easy for when you're nailing on an angle for the wood to skip across and get out of line. So I'm going to put this in just to hold the timber in place while I screw it in. Going back the other way, it's not so bad because it's already held in place. We just make sure that it doesn't move. That one was a bit short, so that's going to get used on an end where we don't need quite as much length. It wasn't cut wrong, by the way. Carty did a good job. It was because we ran out of timber. I am actually going to nail these in because we're nailing that way, we're not nailing straight down into the ceiling. It should be okay. But to reduce the amount of vibration, and we're nailing to something that's kind of not that well supported laterally, so I'm going to pre-drill just the top piece. That literally halves the amount of hammering. This is where we use string line and our pencil mark. And take an average. So fast forward a few hours and we're ready for plasterboard. I had to add some extra timber on the ends here because the trusses that are here are actually hidden inside that wall there behind that insulation. So we need something to support the end of the plasterboard. We have these horizontal pieces here and here because that will be the entry to the roof space. So obviously you need to get into there for maintenance or any electrical additions, plumbing changes, that sort of thing. Added some more timber up this end just to support the end of the plasterboard. And you'll also notice that yes, there are quite a few different types and pieces of timber here that I've used. And that's because firstly, this is quite a difficult space. It wasn't really designed for this. When we designed this building, we did request a quote for having the roof trusses specifically designed for this, and the cost was prohibitive just because it's outside of the norm. They were no longer normal roof trusses. It's not very common in Australia, at least, to use this space like this. The other reason is that I have always tried my best to make use of what I have, to reduce waste, to reuse things. This is the last major project we have planned for this property, so I had to buy a little bit of timber, but I've managed to use quite a lot of things that I already had, which always makes me happy. We will need to just add some insulation to that end wall there before the plaster goes in. As you can see, it's all there. That was left over from when we insulated the barn. And there's a bit more here. That was actually given to me years and years ago, and I've kept it. Thankfully, now it's worth keeping, and a bit more there. Because this is the roof space, obviously it gets quite warm, so more insulation the better, and we're using up little bits and pieces that are left over. Much easier with two people. You have to keep an eye out for anything that gets dropped on the floor, because when you sit the sheet on it, it can dent the sheet or crack it, mark it. Now we have to cut out the doorways that I mentioned earlier that allow access from here into the rest of the ceiling space for maintenance. So what I'm doing is using the frame, the timber frame that's behind as a guide. So you just keep the saw against that. It doesn't have to be accurate because all this gets covered up by the frame, the door frame itself, and the architrave. What you couldn't see is that I scored this side with the knife from the back in the normal way that you cut gyprock, just because it's much quicker. And that's it. It's one done. Now, this unfortunately shows how wasteful plasterboard or gyprocking can be, because as you can see down this end, there's a gap. So you would think, well, why didn't I put the sheet up there and then just use little pieces up here above and below the door? Well, the problem with that is that you have a great potential for cracking to occur, especially around doorways. It's probably not so critical here because this is a doorway that's not going to be used regularly, and it's tiny. It's not a big door, so there's not a lot of weight there flexing the wall frame around. But there's a potential for cracks to form here or here if you'd used separate pieces, because they're not quite as strong as a whole piece.